Hello, everyone. We will start the press conference at exactly 3 o'clock. So we have a couple of minutes to wait, just to inform everyone. But we will post the press statement very, very soon on the chat site, so you can download those. Okay, I'll be back off again. Maybe we'll start a bit more music, and then we'll resume back at about. We'll stop the music at 2:59 and then start on the dot at 3. Thank you. Okay, I need to address my team just for housekeeping. Is Ellie, is Dr. Fadli here already? Okay, we'll start. It's 3 o'clock. Okay. So hello and a very big welcome to all. Can we switch to the normal mode? Sure. Yeah, can you take the banner away? Is it still there, Ellie? Okay, I'll just start things off. Hello and a very big welcome to all. My name is Wong Chen. I'm the Member of Parliament for Subang, Malaysia, and I will be moderating the press conference today. To members of the media, a copy of the press statement is available to you to download via the chat function in your Zoom interface, so I'm sure you can find where that is. Now, this session will also be recorded and will be made available via the social media accounts of the participants, including myself. So let me just start by providing a very quick introduction and also to lay out the intended sequence of this press conference. Now, about 10 weeks ago, my dear friend, Madam Musokwa, the fearless woman MP in exile from Cambodia, contacted me about an idea that Mr. Sam Rainsy had, that is to get a group of us to seriously consider, question, and redefine the concept of ASEAN. From this initial spark, Madam Mu then got Sam, Kasit Piromya, Emil Kerjas, and myself into an informal group of 5 to ponder about ASEAN matters and policies. Now, my boss, Anwar Ibrahim, approved some free time for me, which is good. So I don't have to do a lot of Malaysian economic policies, but to focus on this side project. And this project is, this ASEAN project of ours is still evolving. Mr. Sam Rainsy, as the main promoter, will speak or touch upon it a little bit later. Now, in the middle of us contemplating political, economic, and security issues about ASEAN, the military coup in Myanmar happened. And when things got progressively worse in Myanmar, we decided as a group that we must issue a press statement, and so we reached out to like-minded politicians in the region. Today's press statement on the situation in Myanmar has 6 signatories. There are in fact a lot more lawmakers from many ASEAN countries that support this initiative, but we thought we will do a selection of 6 because it's partly symbolic to showcase one prominent lawmaker from one country, and we have 6 out of 10 ASEAN countries represented today. Now, all 6 signatories have good track records on human rights, good governance, and democracy. On the other part, there was also a need to dispel the perception that lawmakers in Southeast Asia do not care at all about human rights abuses in our own backyard. So I'll just quickly read the 6 signatories. They are Mr. Sam Rainsy, opposition leader of Cambodia, currently in exile in Paris. Dr. Fadli Zon, he is now in Ukraine at the moment, but he's an MP and former Deputy Speaker of Indonesia. He will try his best to join us in this PC, otherwise we'll have to go without him. And Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, the current opposition leader in Malaysia. Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan from the Philippines, current chair of the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. Mr. Chong, a dear friend of ours, former Deputy Speaker of Singapore. Mr. Kasit Piromya, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand. Now, more detailed profiles of the signatories are attached at the to the press statement. So you can read a bit more about their background if you want to. Now, today, it appears that we only have 2 out of the 6 signatories present, namely Mr. Rainsy and Kun Kasit Piromya. As I said, Dr. Adli will try his best to join us from Ukraine. Now, Mr. Anwar, Charles, and Senator Francis apologize for their unavoidable absence today. Now we come to the sequence of this press conference. We will start with Mr. Sam Rainsy, who will read the press statement and offer some of his personal views of the situation in Myanmar. This will be followed by Kun Kasit, after which we will invite journalists to pose questions to the group. I would like to invite Mr. Rainsy, the opposition leader of Cambodia in exile. The floor is yours, Mr. Rainsy.
Thank you. ASEAN needs a new vision to end the Myanmar killings. Yes, ASEAN needs a new vision. The peoples of ASEAN aspire to a peaceful, democratic region that respects human rights. ASEAN governments are failing to effectively address the unfolding Myanmar crisis. While the brave pro-democracy protesters of Myanmar are being killed by the military junta, all other ASEAN governments are demonstrating a lack of political will and unity to pressure the military junta to end the killings. The events in Myanmar display yet again the importance of ASEAN governments in dealing with a regional crisis. For decades, ASEAN governments have consistently failed to protect their peoples from one crisis to another, including transnational haze pollution, the Rohingya humanitarian disasters, and a multitude of anti-democratic and human rights abuses. At the heart of the matter, ASEAN governments have been handicapped by the self-imposed doctrine of non-interference. This doctrine may have been needed in the past, but it has since become a major hindrance and stumbling block to the development of participatory democracies and the protection of the basic human rights of the peoples of ASEAN. We, the understand former and current ASEAN members of parliament, demand our respective ASEAN governments abandon the old doctrine of non-interference and pursue a new approach of constructive and critical engagement with the option of imposing trade and economic sanctions on the Myanmar military junta. All other ASEAN governments must unite and send an unequivocal message to the Myanmar military junta to immediately free all political prisoners, to restore the political situation in Myanmar to that prior to the 1st February 2021 coup, and to respect the people's votes in the November 2020 general elections. All those responsible for the killing of innocent people must also be prosecuted and brought to justice. Failing which, all ASEAN governments must unite and suspend Myanmar's membership from ASEAN, and thereafter impose targeted trade and economic sanctions against the military junta and their associates. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, our thoughts and our prayers go to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and all her martyrized supporters in Myanmar. They will never be forgotten by supporters of democracy in Asia. As Cambodia's opposition leader, I last met with Daw Aung San Suu Kyi in Yangon in March 2013 on the occasion of a Congress of the National League for Democracy. A few days before, I had met with Anwar Ibrahim in Kuala Lumpur, and I conveyed his greetings to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi in Yangon. At that time, 8 years ago, the three of us started to develop the idea of active solidarity among ASEAN people who share the same ideals of freedom and democracy with respect for human rights. Anwar Ibrahim is a signatory of this statement. Opposition leaders in our region know the meaning of persecution only too well. Events over the last few years, and especially over the last few weeks, show the urgent necessity to develop active and effective solidarity among ASEAN peoples who long for freedom and true democracy. The signatories of this statement, who will hopefully be joined by many others, believe that it will serve as a determining step for the building of such a solidarity among the people of ASEAN who share the same values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rainsy. Can I now invite Kun Kasit to give some comments? You have 2 to 5 minutes. Thank you. Kun Kasit, you have to unmute your button. You're okay.
Okay now. I just want to emphasize the word solidarity that has been mentioned by the Excellency Sam Rainsy. I think this time we really have solidarity in place because of the fact that the issue is no longer confined within the boundaries of Myanmar as a country. I think the issue in Myanmar, the coup d'etat on the 1st of February, has become part and parcel of our common struggle for human rights and democracy. We are being aided by the advent of the communication technology, and I think it facilitates our joint working together. So this solidarity in opposition to the coup d'etat will be long-lasting. It will not be a one-shot affair. At the same time, I think we have heard both the bad news and the good news. The bad news is the continued use of force killing people by the junta authorities in Myanmar. The good news is the solidarity of the Myanmar or the Burmese people or our friends and so on. Both the Burman people and all the minorities have put up opposition to the coup d'etat. The fact that they are fighting for their life, for their survival, for democracy, for their freedom, and so on, is a great encouragement. And in that sense, it is an obligation on all of us in the rest of ASEAN to render support, moral support, vocal support, and whatever we can do in the future, even to help in the funding and so on, because food must be eaten, medicine must be provided, and so on. And I think our joint working with the movements inside Myanmar, I think what we can do from outside Myanmar is to do the networking, to put our collective voice to the international community, to the international organization, to the world leaders, and so on. And I think we can also at the same time push our respective government to act properly and not to give a sort of consensus or appeasement to the activities of the military authorities in Myanmar. I think we have not only the adherence to the various UN principles, we have our own ASEAN Charter. And so far, none of the ASEAN leaders has come forth in the, implementation and realization of the ASEAN Charter. So this is something that we could do together in pushing our respective government for once to stand with principle, do away with the principle of non-interference, because no government can have the blank check, the right to, suppress its own people. Once the Burmese people or the Myanmar people are being suppressed, it is our duty and obligation to come to their assistance and provide that solidarity of movement in order to push back the military people into their barracks and restore democracy to the Myanmar people. And in that sense also, it would enhance the solidarity, cohesiveness, and the very image of ASEAN community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Kasit. I see that Dr. Fadli Zon, even though he's in Ukraine, has managed to join us. So I would like to now invite Bapak Adli. Bapak Adli sedia ya? Yeah? You have 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Fadli Zon, member of Indonesian Parliament and also former Deputy Speaker of the Parliament. Really privileged to be part of this unequivocal joint statement, although it looks as personal stance, but will not change the, it seems that will not change the situation directly, but it comes from high political figures of ASEAN. So it further should be heard as the region's people aspiration. The joint statement is fully in line with the official standpoint released by the Interparliamentary Cooperation Committee of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, where I am the chair, urging ASEAN to apply a more progressive and dynamic approach in interpreting the non-interference principle. This principle must be tied to the understanding of the shared responsibility of ASEAN member states in exercising the common principles and values enshrined in ASEAN Charter, such as democracy, respect to human rights, good governance, rule of law, and constitutional government. So clearly, ASEAN's decade-old tradition of non-interference is in internal matters of members, and a consensus-based approach duly enshrined in ASEAN Charter have been exploited for years as an excuse for its inaction on regional humanitarian crises, such as Rohingya genocide, for example. I have been 3 consecutive years in AIPA, ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, submitted this case to the executive committee and always failed because of this statute non-interference phrase in the ASEAN Charter. So I'm in the view that the unfolding situation in Myanmar is under the R2P, right to protect provision of the United Nations. The world should not see more killings, and Myanmar crisis is a blessing in disguise for ASEAN to introspect, reform, and downsize if necessary. And I reaffirm that ASEAN is in dire need of reformative steps. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bapak Fadli. Yes, we'll now take questions from the journalists present here. While I'm encouraged by the support and presence of several CSOs today, this Q&A session is strictly only for journalists. My team and I will endeavor to hold a separate event with all CSOs on ASEAN matters very, very soon. So let's start the Q&A. For journalists, please state your name and media organization, and you can direct the question to either a specific person or to the group. So please feel free to unmute, and then if you wish to speak. Okay, we'll open up now for questions.
Hi, hello. Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Karuni. I'm from the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper in Jakarta. My question is for either speakers, for all speakers maybe. It's about the non-interference phrase in the ASEAN Charter. So what is your concrete thought about it? What should ASEAN do? What should all the ministers or the governments in ASEAN do about it? I mean, what is the concrete actions can be taken while the phrase is still there? Should they taken out that phrase? Something like that. And basically, what is the concrete things the governments can do to stop the repressive actions in Myanmar? Thank you.
Anyone want to take this question? Unmute.
Well, maybe I would like to just comment a little bit on this. Maybe I think we should urge our own government to take the initiative, to discuss about this matter, because without any amendment of the ASEAN Charter, I think it is very difficult for ASEAN to involve in any problem, any situation because of this non-interference phrase. And I think this is ridiculous, for the time being, just to neglect and close our eyes in front of our own backyard or front yard. Thank you.
Can I come in now?
Yes, please.
Yes. I think the principle of non-interference is being used or has been used when there is no political will to do anything. So at the moment, I think the rest of the ASEAN member states, the other 9, have somewhat implicitly decided not to do anything about the situation in Myanmar. But if they have the political will to do so, then there is no such thing as non-interference. And I, from my own experience, would like to cite a few cases where there were a lot of interference in each other's affair. And let's go back to the situation in Myanmar about 10 years ago. Behind the scene, over series of cups of coffees or even glasses of wine and so on. The other 9 foreign ministers of ASEAN did have so many informal meetings with the then foreign minister of Myanmar, who is now again the foreign minister of Myanmar. And behind the scene, we were together collectively, the 9 of us, pushing the Myanmar side on the realization of the 7-point roadmap. That's one point. We did that. We interfere, and then we were successful in the realization eventually of the return of democracy, the elections, the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, and so on. And now it has been taken back. Okay, so we have the right to push back the military junta and restore democracy. It's our every right to interfere because we were part and parcel in the realization of democracy in Myanmar 10 years ago. That's the first point. Second, the Nakris cyclone also. We did interfere before the military government of Myanmar at that time opened up the country. We set up a secretariat, headed by the former ASEAN Secretary General in Yangon, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan, to help Myanmar, I think, rehabilitate the whole country after the Nakris devastation and so on. Third, also, when we were having a border dispute with Cambodia, Thailand and Cambodia and so on, the other 9 ASEAN countries did not stay put. Behind the scene, they were pushing the 2 of us, Cambodia and Thailand, to work together to stop these border skirmishes and so on. And at that time, I think Indonesia was very active indeed in trying to forge a sort of a compromise and so on. And I think to a certain extent, ASEAN intervention did bring about a sort of a peace situation. And eventually the negotiation started and the whole issue went to the World Court in The Hague and so on. So when there was a political will to do anything, non-interference doesn't exist. So what we have to do now is to urge the other 9 ASEAN governments to politically decide to be proactive and talk to the military authorities of Myanmar at the moment, and for them, to commit to the return of democracy within 12 months, and at the same time, stop all the atrocities against the Myanmar people. Thank you.
Very good. Sam, you want to say something? Unmute.
Yes. I think the concept of non-interference is really outdated. It's just a way for dictators to help and to protect each other. Therefore, we need a more progressive concept of solidarity, of humanity. The concept of non-interference is incompatible with the concept of humanity. This concept of humanity is enshrined in the founding principles of the Republic of Indonesia, known as Pancasila. How can you stand idle when humanity is just next door? Humanity is knocking at your door to ask for help. I think humanity should prevail over non-interference. And as members of parliament, as representatives of peoples in ASEAN region, our role is to push for a change in mentality. Because in the end, when the people have clear thoughts and have determination to do something from the grassroots people up, then governments cannot ignore the aspirations of the people. Thank you.
Okay, as the moderator, I should not answer, but I'll just join in very quickly. From a legalistic point of view, the ASEAN Charter talks about democracy very clearly in point number 4, right? To maintain a democratic and harmonious environment in the region. So if you have a conflict between non-interference and also a conflict with maintaining democracy, then obviously the democracy portion is more important. So there is actually no legalistic barrier for ASEAN countries or the 9 other ASEAN countries to interfere and do that, because that's a greater duty, as pointed out by the other speakers. Okay, we'll take another question now. Anybody?
I have one question.
Yes, you are from?
I'm Dian. I'm from Jakarta Post. I want to ask you all about democratic transition in Myanmar. I think in the last in the last few weeks, Indonesia said it should be an inclusive democratic transition, but at the moment, the ideals or the goals that the pro democracy and junta is so far apart. Can you one side wants to just unravel the entire 2008 constitution, while the junta want to maintain it. So can you speak on your own experiences, for example, in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, many other countries, how your country can achieve smooth democratic or political transition, and how can you as parliamentarians and the government of each country help Myanmar to at least bridge between the ideals between the pro-democracy and junta so that they can resolve their problem. Thank you.
Okay, anybody want to answer this question first?
Okay, can I try first? Because in Thailand, I throughout my life, I went through so many coup d'etats. The Thai experience has been that after the military take over, then they set up a constitution assembly or a constitution drafting team and write a new constitution. And if the present military junta of Myanmar doesn't like the 2008 constitution, they should spell it out. What are the articles and so on that they do not like, and what are the articles that they want to change? And if they want to change, is to make it more authoritarian, less democratic, or is it going to change in order to make Myanmar more democratic through a new democratic constitution? This is something that we can ask and we can press the military junta to spell out what is in their mind. Then after that, then I think then the two sides could sit down and talk to one another. It's not difficult. If the junta would like to speak to anyone, they can set up the meeting at any time. Thank you.
Anyone else want to answer this?
Yeah, maybe I would
Dr.
like
Fadli,
just to add a little bit. I think we had experience in democratic transition in Indonesia, especially the military involvement before 1998. And then we had a very smooth transition with the military fraction at the time in the parliament for the last one after 1999. And then after that, we can, I think, fully fulfill the democratic procedures in our parliament. So early 2018, I had the privilege discussion to have a discussion with Kofi Annan at the time. And then Kofi Annan actually suggested that Myanmar also can learn the process of democratic transition in Indonesia, especially from the military point of view. I think this is very important. And then I mentioned this also to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia, that we maybe should take a more proactive approach in order to have a dialogue with the military junta in Myanmar about this matter. And then since Indonesia has a very good experience in this, maybe we can also assist how to do this democratic transition in Myanmar. But with the recent development, I don't know what is the roadmap forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. And if not, are we going to take another question? Sam, do you want to answer this, Sam?
Yes, I think we need to specify transition towards what? It must be democratic transition. Therefore, democratic transition must be based on the result of democratic elections. meaning based on the will of the people. Regarding Myanmar, I think transition must be based on the result of the November 2020 elections. And we cannot trust the junta with their promise to organize another election next year. In the meantime, they will have dissolved Aung San Suu Kyi party, the National League of Democracy, and then the election will be meaningless, as the case of Cambodia, when the Hun Sen regime dissolved the only parliamentary opposition party and then organized an election without the participation of the opposition. That kind of election is meaningless, and it should not be used as the basis for any fake transition. We need a democratic transition. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Anybody?
Can I ask a question, Ken?
Please go ahead.
It's Nick Cochin here from Thomson Reuters. I wondered if the members of ASEAN should consider some form of economic sanction of the regime in Myanmar to put pressure on those individuals as well as the country to restrain their current repression.
Okay, thank you. So the question is on whether there should be economic sanctions, right? Okay. Anybody want to answer this?
I would not want to see economic sanction in the sense that it would hurt everyone in Myanmar. Their life is already difficult. We should not compound it. But there should be targeted sanction against all the military personnel and the civilian personnel that have rendered support to the military takeover at this point in time. I think their bank accounts abroad, the joint ventures emitting more than 100 companies are the sort of military-owned or state-owned companies and so on. All of this should be sanctioned, targeted sanctions on the military junta and their associates, and not on the people of Myanmar. Definitely no on this account.
Okay, anybody want to add on to this? Dr. Fadli? Sam?
I agree with what Kasit Piromya has just said. Individual and targeted sanctions, yes.
Yeah, I think it's I agree also with Kun Kasit. That's very important because economic sanction to the people will just hurt the Myanmar people more.
Well, I'll just add in a bit. In Malaysia, we have a state of emergency, so Parliament is not allowed to sit at the moment. But when Parliament resumes, I will ask a question as a member of Parliament in Malaysia, of course, to ask the government to identify through the banking system whether any of this junta uses a Malaysian bank. I think that one must be carried out, just to freeze the account or at least to disassociate themselves quickly. Yeah. Okay, let's take another question there. Anybody out there?
I'll ask a question. Bhavan from the South China Morning Post.
Please, go ahead.
I just want, there has been some meetings, ASEAN meetings that has been going on, I think, among the SOMs and so on. And it seems like the Myanmar representatives of the junta have been participating. So the question to the panelists is, whether ASEAN should, in this interim period, be, allowing, or what should be the stance of ASEAN with regards to the Myanmar military being represented in ASEAN meetings? As the year progresses, we will see higher profile meetings, ASEAN Regional Forum, and so on. So if the representative of the junta participate, does that mean that ASEAN is recognizing the legitimacy of the coup makers?
Very good question. Yeah. So anybody wants to answer this?
May I venture?
Please.
I think we have no conditionality as to what type of government and so on, in the ASEAN Charter or in past practices. So legally, you cannot say that the military junta delegation cannot come to the ASEAN meeting. But and the fact is that the foreign minister of Myanmar was already in Bangkok a couple of weeks ago to meet both with his Thai counterpart and I think the Indonesian foreign minister. So that is implicitly the recognition of the sovereign power holding, I think, power in Myanmar. But concurrently, I think to continue with the Burmese, the Myanmar present in all the ASEAN meeting is what the ASEAN leadership of the 9 must do now is to come out with effective measures and policies and so on, that they have to release Aung San Suu Kyi and all the charged prisoners and so on, stop the violence and so on. They can put this as a conditionality. And once given the Myanmar the time, a few days to think about it, and if the military junta do not comply to the demands and so on, then the second measure is not to allow them to attend the meeting or to suspend or to postpone the meeting or to turn it into an informal one and not a formal one and so on. There are so many formulas of going around and so on. But the message must be clearly put to the authorities in Myanmar that, for whatever activities that were to be done together and so on, the killing must stop, the release of all the prisoners and so on. And I think the return to the negotiating table and that's so many things can be done. I think the leaders of ASEAN can put this on the table. It doesn't hurt them and has nothing to do with the interference because this is an ASEAN thing, part of the community, a part of the family and so on.
I would like to make a comment here, please.
Yes, go ahead.
There is a point that should be raised concerning the chairmanship of ASEAN. A few years ago, Myanmar was denied chairmanship. It is a rotating chairmanship of ASEAN. But when came the turn of Myanmar, the chairmanship was skipped because I think the rest of the ASEAN countries would be ashamed to have Myanmar led by the military junta to preside over ASEAN. So this is a concrete step that has been accepted by the totality of ASEAN members in the past.
Very good. Dr. Fadli?
Just would like to add from the parliamentary perspective, we are going to consider to calls upon the AIPA, ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, to suspend the membership of the Myanmar Parliament until the Parliament resumes its function. And maybe we are going to prepare also the emergency item to be raised in the upcoming Interparliamentary Union, IPU, session in April regarding the military coup d'etat in Myanmar.
Thank you. Okay, can we take another question if there's any more questions out there?
Thailand.
Last call, because we will have to end this. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, there's one. Melissa Go, are you asking a question?
Yeah.
Please.
What could happen? I mean, what's going to happen to ASEAN as a grouping if nothing is being done? What could happen to the grouping as a whole? What's the worst case scenario?
Kasit is laughing, so I'll let him answer this.
Yes, I think then we keep on going down the drain. There will not be any respectability left. The perception of the world international community would be negative. And all the development cooperation and so on will be more or less suspended or withdrawn because there will be conditionalities about the situation in Myanmar. Unless and until the ASEAN community as a whole solve the Myanmar problem, Then I think cooperative activities with all the ASEAN dialogue partners, I'm quite sure would be suspended and so on. So that's the first thing. Second, then many of the European or Western companies, including Japan, South Korea, and so on, will be quite reluctant to do further business with ASEAN as a whole and with Myanmar in particular. And we are talking about a common ASEAN market, about connectivity, about internal flow of capital goods and personnel and so on. All of this would be affected because of the coup d'etat in Myanmar. We are altogether negatively affected. That's the first point. The second point is that if it is like this as it's going down the drain, precisely what Wong Chen has said in the beginning, we're going to set up a new ASEAN, a democratic one. I think it's the vision of Sam Rainsy, and I think the rest of us do share that if the 10 leadership of ASEAN at the moment have been destroying ASEAN continuously for so many years, then it's about time that they don't run ASEAN. We will run ASEAN, a new ASEAN that belongs to the people. Thank you.
Yes, anyone else want to answer this?
Well, just to add some points, I think we just have to keep fighting, for the principles and goals of the ASEAN Charter. I think we should not give up. The principles is already there: democracy, respect to human rights, good governance, rule of law, and constitutional government. The most important thing is the political will of the other ASEAN leaders to pressure the Myanmar government to what you call it, to go with this principles. That is very important thing, and I think we should go from many perspectives, not only the government but also the parliament and civil society and the press. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Sam, any last comment perhaps you want to add on this?
Yes, I think that we have to push for democracy in all ASEAN countries. When democracy prevails in all ASEAN countries, then there will be a new ASEAN where non-interference will be irrelevant. So again, I think that the concept of humanity and solidarity will prevail based on the will of the people. Therefore, we have to try our best to change the mentality, the perception, and the determination of peoples in our region to fight for freedom and democracy based on human rights. Thank you.
Okay, I think we will have to end because we've been talking for about 45 minutes. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your kind attendance. And lastly, I just want to thank the organizers, Ellie, Gillian, Ivan, Kevin, and Bala for sorting out the logistics. It's been quite difficult to balance this thing because we had to get Sam in Paris and Dr. Fadli in Ukraine and Kasit in Bangkok. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you again for attending this. For the CSOs, we will be in touch, and for the media, thank you so much. Okay, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
จะมีอีกไหมเนี่ย